Yo, what's up? Dr. Swole here, MD, pro physique athlete. Today we're going to be talking about training frequency. In other words, we'll be answering the question, how long should you wait before you can train the same muscle again? This question is of particular importance when we start talking about training splits, or how you split up your training for different muscle groups across the week. A lot of people swear by using bro splits, which are low frequency splits where you typically directly train each muscle group just once per week. Meanwhile, there are other popular splits like a 4-day upper lower or push-pull legs where you train each muscle group twice per week. And other splits will even let you increase the frequency higher up to training each muscle group each day in a full body split. How do you know what frequency is optimal and what split you should be using? We'll be answering that today. The first concept we need to understand are how volume, intensity, and frequency interact to give you stimulus. You can think of the stimulus as the signal to your body to drive hypertrophy. Intensity refers to how close you go to failure, so training to failure would be high intensity. Volume is the total amount of work you perform for a certain muscle group. You can look at it as sets times reps times weight lifted. And frequency is how often you train each muscle group. So if you trained closer to failure, you'd be increasing stimulus to some degree for each set. If you increased your volume, you'd be increasing your stimulus. And if you increase your frequency while training with the same volume intensity for each set, then you would also increase stimulus. What I want to say here is that we can't just see training frequency in a vacuum. It doesn't exist in isolation, and it does interact with intensity and volume. You are going to have an optimal combination of frequency, volume, and intensity that you will need to give you the right amount of stimulus that you can actually grow from. You might wonder, why isn't more stimulus better? The problem is, as you create more stimulus, you also generate more fatigue. And there's only a certain amount of fatigue that your body can actually recover from. So there is a such thing as doing too much. And if you train too hard with too many sets too often, you will generate a lot of stimulus, but you will generate too much fatigue for your body to handle. At this point, you'll stop seeing gains and you might actually even regress in gains. You need to be tweaking these three variables to give you the best rate of progress. So your training frequency will depend on your volume and intensity training style. Volume and frequency have a particularly interesting relationship. In particular, a major benefit of higher frequencies is that it allows you to train with higher volumes. When you're training with high volumes, say 20 sets for a muscle group each week, it makes sense to spread those sets over more training sessions. This is because, say you had to do 20 sets of quads in one workout, by the end of that workout, you'd be trash and you wouldn't be performing very well. You won't be able to lift as much weight for as many reps, and that means your stimulus will suffer. But if you spread those out into 2 sessions of 10 sets each, or spread them out over 3 sessions, you'd be performing better on every set, and thus you'll accumulate more stimulus across the week in total. As people progress beyond the beginner stage, they tend to require more training volume. The other relationship we need to talk about is intensity and frequency. If you train with really high intensities like going to failure and beyond, you're going to generate a lot of fatigue and soreness from that, and it may take you longer to recover. So for example, if you're training a muscle group with high frequencies, like 4 to 6 times per week, you probably wouldn't want to be going to failure all the time. Okay, let's talk about a foundational principle called the SRA curve. This is really going to be important for us to understand. This applies to all sorts of different types of training, but it basically describes how our body reacts after a training session. Let's say that this is time and this is training performance. At time 0, we have a training session. After that training session, your performance is going to go down because of fatigue. This is when you're going to feel really sore and tired. After a certain amount of time, your body starts to recover. That is, the amount of fatigue will decrease and your soreness will start going away. During this period of time, your performance is actually reduced. So for example, if you tried to do a really tough squat session and then tried to reproduce that same squat session the next day, you probably wouldn't perform as well because you'd still be in this phase of decreased performance. If you train the same muscle again during this period, you're not going to be performing as well. And if you keep doing that, you're going to have suboptimal gains and possibly even chronic injuries. Now, at some point, you're going to get into the green here, and this is what they call supercompensation. But at some point, your body is going to adapt and you're going to get into this green phase. This is where your body actually adapts to that stimulus that you provided. This could be in the form of strength, hypertrophy, or even technical adaptations. If you wait long enough before training again, eventually your performance is going to start going down. If you wait long enough, you'll be back to where you started, and if you wait longer, your performance will actually be worse than when you started. So this tells us that there is an optimal time that you want to train that muscle again. You ideally want to hit it at the top of this curve. If you do it correctly, you'll be able to repeat this cycle again from this new heightened position, and then your performance will keep going up in a cyclical fashion. The key is, how do we know when we're in this super compensated zone? Two key factors to look at are soreness and training performance. When you're in this phase of decreased performance, first of all, you're not going to be performing as well on the same lifts, and you're probably going to be sore. We can use these indicators to help us construct our ideal program. This will also help us choose our training split. I'll also note that this SRA curve can expand or contract depending on how much stimulus you put into one workout. So say if you only trained with a couple of sets and you didn't go all the way to failure, you wouldn't have as big of a dip in this initial phase. You'll come back to baseline fairly quickly and you'll super compensate relatively quickly. Now, there is going to be a certain amount of threshold stimulus that you'll need to apply in order to actually get super compensation. This is why you wouldn't get big if you just kept walking, even though technically you are applying some level of stimulus in a very high frequency. Let's use these concepts we've talked about to give you some recommendations on training frequency. Here's how to figure things out for yourself. Everyone is going to be different, so you have to take this on a case-by-case basis and even a muscle-by-muscle basis. First of all, in general, I recommend training to a level of soreness that resolves before your next workout. I think you do want to be aiming to have some soreness after your workout. This basically tells you that you hit the right muscle group with enough stimulus to cause a disruption. Now, you do want that soreness to resolve before your next workout. This rule to some extent dictates our training frequency depending on how sore you get. The amount of soreness you get will be related to your level of training, your training intensity, and your training volume. This is one reason why I don't recommend that beginners train with high frequencies like 3 times per week or more. They just don't have the experience to auto-regulate their training to control the amount of soreness they get. So if I told a beginner to train the same muscle group 2 days in a row, they'd probably be really sore for the next workout and may not perform as well. Also, if you're someone who just loves training really hard and going to failure, this will constrain your training frequency. And I actually think this is a major reason why you see so many pro bodybuilders using bro splits. Since the culture in bodybuilding is so focused on going all the way to failure and training beyond failure, they end up generating a lot of fatigue and they need the whole week to recover before their next session. My next recommendation is that you aim for a minimum of twice per week frequency for each muscle group. This is because, as we said, frequency serves as a vehicle for productive volume. So higher frequencies will allow you to increase the amount of volume you do across the whole week. This may not be as big of an issue for a beginner who's training with low volumes, but as you become more advanced, you're probably going to want to increase the volume, and frequency will allow you to do that. Also, when you train with higher frequencies, you have more opportunities to build technique and develop mind-muscle connection with those muscles. And for a beginner who's able to progress with every workout, having a higher frequency actually gives you more opportunities to progress. Next recommendation, for advanced athletes, I recommend trying higher frequencies, like 3 times or more per week. The main reason for this is fatigue distribution. Fatigue distribution is how you spread out your training stress across the week. In particular, your leg and back training is going to be the most fatiguing. And as an advanced athlete, fatigue is going to be the main limiting factor stopping you from reaching your ultimate potential. When you spread your leg training across more days, you're not going to have these crushing leg days, and you'll end up performing better over all sets. I recently had this happen when I switched from my upper-lower split to full body. I increased my training frequency, but I did it by keeping all the exercises the same, just spreading them out across more days. And I found that even when using the exact same exercises, I was able to lift more reps for the same number of sets. Even though I was using the exact same exercises, I was able to lift more weight for more reps. This will ultimately lead to a hypertrophy advantage because when you're generating more productive volume, you're going to have better stimulus for hypertrophy. Now, the key thing here is auto-regulation, and this does require experience, and that's why I recommend this for more advanced people. When you're training with higher frequencies, you do need to be able to modify workouts depending on how you're feeling. The best way to do this is to train using an RIR system, or reps in reserve. This means you push each set to a certain proximity to failure. So instead of telling myself I'm going to get 10 reps on this bicep curl no matter what, I'll tell myself I'm going to train until I'm 1 rep away from failure. So if I'm having a bad day or if I'm tired from training a muscle group relatively recently, I'll still be able to get a good stimulus and not overdo things. Next recommendation, you want to try higher frequencies for priority muscle groups and slow twitch muscle groups. For priority muscle groups, if you're really trying to bring up a certain muscle group, you'll want to try higher frequencies. This is because you will be able to accumulate more volume and you'll have more opportunities to get a stimulus for that muscle. So for example, if you're trying to bring up your arms, you'll want to look for a training split that allows you to increase frequency for them. You'll see that in some splits, I'll actually do this indirectly. For example, in an upper-lower split, if you take biceps off of upper body days and move them onto leg days, you're indirectly increasing your training frequency for biceps to 4 times per week since you're training them on leg days directly and indirectly with back training on upper body days. Next, try higher training frequencies for slow twitch muscle groups. Slow twitch muscle groups have more type 1 fibers and they tend to do well with higher frequency. Know that this is relative and it depends on the person. You'll have an idea of this for how sore certain muscle groups get from training. Muscles that get really sore from very little training are more likely to be more fast twitch. Finally, use lower frequencies if necessary. So I'm not saying bro splits are going to be bad in general. Some people just respond well to really high intensity, low frequency training, and if that's you, then go for it. Also, if that's the only way that you like to train, and if you train any other way, you're not going to stay consistent, then train in the way that allows you to be sustainable. I'd much rather you follow a bro split that you really like rather than some high frequency split that you're going to fall off of after a few weeks. Ultimately, you're going to have to test out different training frequencies for different muscle groups at different stages in your training career. Optimization in bodybuilding is ultimately an experiment with you as the subject. Don't be afraid to try out higher training frequencies as you get more experienced. I wanted to bust the myth of people saying that naturals have to have at least 48 hours in between workouts to recover. If you're able to auto-regulate and finely tune how much stimulus you're providing in each workout, you can actually train with very high frequencies and benefit from it. If you're trying to optimize your training program, how do you choose the best exercises for hypertrophy? Check out this video where I share 10 rules for exercise selection that will help you choose the best movements for your program. Make sure you subscribe for more top-notch hypertrophy advice, and we'll see you next time.